Hi, I'm Alex Newman, and today I want to talk to you about the UN Agenda 2030, often called the Sustainable Development Goals, or the Post-2015 Development Agenda. So, in a nutshell, this is, to describe it simply, this is just a roadmap for global totalitarianism. It would basically create a global, centralized, technocratic, socialistic, communistic, whatever you want to call it, regime under the guise of all kinds of nice sounding things, saving Mother Earth. The document tells us it's going to heal Mother Earth. It also tells us that we need wealth redistribution. So it would create this kind of totalitarian global government under the guise of saving the planet. This is an extremely dangerous document. If you read through it, what you'll find is that this is basically every totalitarian's dream packaged with a nice marketing package, and it needs to be opposed. So let's go through some of the problems with this. I think a good place to start is goal number 10. Now this goal calls for reducing inequality within and among nations. Now, how do you reduce inequality within and among nations? Well, of course, you do that with wealth redistribution. You take wealth from people who have it, and you redistribute it to people who don't. That's the idea. And it's not enough to just have national socialism. Here, they're talking about inequality between nations. And so what they're really plotting here is to transfer the wealth of what remains of the middle class and, of course, the poor in the Western world, the United States and Europe and Australia and Canada, and Japan and so on, and transfer it to third world dictators through the United Nations, which of course would take its cut. Now obviously the real wealth, the billionaires and the trillionaires, are not going to be surrendering any of their money. They're coming after everyday average Americans. Now, to get some perspective as to how much wealth they want to redistribute, consider that the last official price tag I saw, which was published by a Reuters propagandist, said they were going to need more than 170 trillion with a T dollars to implement this agenda. Now, not all of that would go to wealth redistribution to prop up third world dictators, but a lot of it would. So we're talking about a massive amount of money here. For some perspective, the U.S. economy is about $17 trillion per year, the GDP. So we are dealing with an enormous sum of money here that would completely restructure the world. And actually, the document makes this pretty clear all throughout. It says that no one can be left behind. And when they say no one, they mean no one. Not a single Indian living in the Amazon rainforest, not a single American living in the Blue Ridge Mountains. No one can be left behind by this crazy UN agenda. Now, some of the socialists of the world, the former head of NATO, actually a socialist, Javier Solana, he said that this would be the next great leap forward. And he published this in a Soros-funded propaganda organ. For those who remember, the last great leap forward involved the deaths of tens of millions of people. It took place in communist China after the communists took over. They launched this great leap forward that was supposedly going to take the Chinese people forward. Actually, it just killed a lot of them. And David Rockefeller later went to communist China. David Rockefeller is a big sustainability globalist guy who admits in his book to conspiring with secret cabal against the interests of the United States to create a one-world system. He wrote in the New York Times after going to China that the social experiment under the butcher, communist mass murderer Chairman Mao was one of the most important in all of history. Now, the communist Chinese dictatorship has actually come out and proudly bragged about its role in creating this this Agenda 2030. They said they played a crucial role in developing this crazy UN agenda for wealth redistribution. Other parts of this agenda, we could go to goal number 4, for example, which deals with education. Now, read this document. Read Agenda 2030. It's not all that long. Anybody can read it. And they tell you in here that they're going to brainwash your kids. They tell you that all the children need to be so-called educated so that they have the knowledge and the skills necessary not just to accept sustainable development, but to promote sustainable development. Now, sustainable development is this UN ideology. I was actually at the UN Conference on Sustainable Development in 2012 down in Rio de Janeiro, and just to give you some idea of what this ideology is about, there was one poster that encapsulated it perfectly. It had a sick Earth, an anthropomorphic Earth with a thermometer sticking out of its mouth, and then the doctor came and said, "I know your problem. You have humans," as if humans are a disease, right? What do you do with a disease? Well, you try to eradicate it. You try to destroy it, right? And so they're treating humans here as a disease that needs to be dealt with. Now, this document says it's going to heal Mother Earth. by imposing this sustainable development vision on us. It says that children and young people are critical agents of change to bring about this sustainable development transformation. So what they're talking about here, and they say we need vaccines for all and government health care for everyone and abortions for everyone, right? They say reproductive and sexual health, and everybody knows that means abortion. They haven't been shy about talking about that. So they're talking about a global totalitarian government that would redistribute wealth, that would control the entire economy, right? In this document, they talk about that we need to change the way we consume and produce things. The only way to do that, of course, is to control, using government, the way that things are produced and consumed. So we are dealing here with a very dangerous document. Now, on the bright side, despite all the praise from third world dictators, right? Robert Mugabe, the genocidal Marxist mass murderer who's enslaved Zimbabwe, he said this is going to usher in this wonderful, he called it a brave new world, right? A brave new world. That's what Robert Mugabe said, and he thought it was great. I mean, the document is just packed with crazy extremism, and so it's no wonder that the dictators of the world love it. We need to stop it, though. And fortunately for us, this is essentially meaningless as it relates to the United States. Obama knew that there was no chance the U.S. Senate would ratify this monstrosity, and so he just signed it as this kind of executive agreement. Fortunately for Americans, executive agreements are actually non-things, right? These don't really exist, so Obama's been trying to implement this using executive orders and all kinds of other stuff. But the Trump administration has taken a pretty hard line on the United Nations, right? Trump called the UN enemy of freedom and an enemy of the United States. So, why would you want to implement the Agenda 2030 of your enemy, of the enemy of your country, of the enemy of freedom? Well, you wouldn't want to, right? So let's hope for the best, but we need to get busy. We need to oppose this. We need to educate others. We need to be in communication with our members of Congress to make sure that this monstrosity is stopped in its tracks.